Hi, welcome to today's webinar. My name's Eddie Pratt. I'm the Managing Director of Product Focus. I'm delighted to present to you Cyril, who is our expert presenter for today's webinar. Over to you, Cyril.
So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. A very warm welcome to this webinar on product discovery. So this is how it's going to work. I'm Cyril. I'm a senior consultant at Product Focus. And this webinar will have three parts. We'll have a brief intro of who we are. Then we'll discuss product discovery and some of the issues, some of the methods that you can use to do a proper product discovery. And then there will be a Q&A. So who we are? Well, we're proud to say that we're the leading product management training organization in Europe. We've been operating since 2006, which according to my calculation is close to 18 years. And we offer world-class courses on two different areas. One is product management and product marketing for technology-based product. This training is open to everyone, aspiring product managers and people who already have a little bit of experience but want to further their skills. And then we have another training called Leading Product Management. And this one is a little bit different. It's open to people who already have significant experience in product management, who either are already leading product management teams or who want to start and become more proficient at leading a team when the time comes. And those trainings can be delivered either face-to-face or online, and they also can be delivered as a public course where you will find and meet with other professionals, or they can be done as private courses where we come to you, deliver the training to your team, and customize the content to your company. And finally, as you can see, our excellent Trustpilot score is a tribute to the very good quality of our training. So, as European thought leaders, there's a lot of resources. If you enjoy this webinar, you will find a lot more of that type of content on our website. We have over 26,000 readers signed up to our newsletter. They receive journals, infographics, white papers, and a lot of best practice. So, a little bit about me. I've got about 20 years of experience in product management. I've been spending the last 10 years more in leadership positions. And when I'm not training or delivering webinars, what I do is specialize on helping transform product functions so that I'm helping product functions become empowered teams. I'm helping the leadership through that transition and advising on how to launch and scale world-class products. I've got experience across e-commerce, fintech, marketplaces, telecoms, and I've got an MBA from the Open University. So that's me. Let's talk about discovery, and I'd like to start with a little story that you may remember. You know, if you want to have a healthy diet of fresh fruits and vegetable, you know, it's hard work, right? You have to go to the local farmer's market. You have to bring back the produce. You have to wash it, to peel it, to juice it. And then you have to clean up all the mess. So in 2016, there's a company that was set to completely transform and revolutionize this space. It was called Juicero. And the promise was to change healthy drinks forever. And what it did, it offered a $6.99 Wi-Fi connected juicer, and although the price was later reduced to $4.99, and the way it worked, you had to buy or have a subscription to produce packs that cost between $4 and $10, and these will be used with the machine, the press. It would compress that produce and then create a delicious drink. So if you think about the model, it's a little bit like what we have with inkjet printers, with the Nespresso machine. You have the machine that is needed, and then the consumable that you will then need to buy on a regular basis. So a marvel of engineering. That machine was beautiful. Perhaps over-engineered even. The company founder, Doug Evans, he liked to compare himself to Steve Jobs, and he really wanted to have high attention to detail. And that machine was really had high attention to detail. And he was very proud to say that it was able to wield almost 4 tons of pressure, comparing it to 2 Teslas. And as we said, it had a Wi-Fi connection. It had a QR code. It could check the pack to ensure that it was fresh. Unfortunately, it didn't work if you didn't have Wi-Fi. It was a bit of a drawback. And therefore, the business was going. It was not doing amazing, but it was slowly getting there. But then in April 2017, so almost a year later, they had the worst day ever, a PR disaster. And it came from 2 journalists from Bloomberg. And they published a story and a video under this title, "Do You Need a $400 Juicer?" I'm going to play a short clip to explain, and that will explain what happened. So it turns out you didn't really need 4 tons of pressure to be able to extract the juice from the pack. And therefore it was a beautiful and very well engineered solution to a problem that did not really exist. It was the wrong solution. And 18 months after the launch, they shut down operation. That was in September 2017. Now, you could think that this is kind of the result of a scrappy little startup that managed to get funding and somehow slipped through the net of investor diligence. But the problem is that no one is safe. And you have here 3 companies that I think we can admire because they've brought wonderful products. They still dominate, at least for 2 of them, some part of the industry, and yet they came out with products that were not successful. And this really illustrates how difficult discovery and getting discovery right can be. The Amazon Fire Phone, for instance, came with a very fancy 3D effect. You can see there are 4 cameras on the 4 corners of the phone, and it was able to track your eyes and see where you were looking to, so that the display will look like there was some depth in it. And I've seen a few demos. It was really fun to look at. But did the product really hit the mark? Not really. It was shut down after a year. Microsoft Zune. I mean, the Zune had a shorter run than the iPod, but the Zune HD in particular, it just came too late after when the iPod was about to be discontinued and the iPhone had started taking off. Again, Microsoft, they've done wonderful things, but in this particular case, they got it wrong. And Nokia, who dominated the mobile phone space at some point, came up with a product that, wasn't a terrible idea, but it turns out that it was the wrong product. It didn't really work as a game console. It didn't really work as a phone either. Again, pointing to issues with discovery. So if no one is safe, that means we really need to apply our minds on how do we make sure that we don't fall into the same sort of trap. So what is discovery and how does it work? Well, discovery, you could say, is the methodical approach to validate both the problem and the solution. So it follows that double diamond approach where first, you start diverging on the range of problems that you could be considering, and then you start narrowing down and select only a few problems that you think are worth looking at. And then again, you start opening again with solutions, opening a wide range of potential solutions, which you then start narrowing down based on different tests and experiments that you're going to be doing. And that allows you to land on the right product. And we're going to describe a few techniques that you can follow to be able to do that. But first, there are two prerequisites that we absolutely need to have. And I'm going to go quickly through those because it's more for context, but the first prerequisite is that there's no substitute for having good domain knowledge. So you need to understand the market size, how it's going to grow. You need to understand the trends, potential disruptions. You need to understand the technological, economic factors, the regulatory frameworks, what your competitors are doing. Why is that important? Because when you're doing discovery, you're going to find a lot of things that confuse you. And without a good understanding of the domain, it will be very difficult to separate something that is actually a profound piece of insight from something that is actually quite anecdotal and rather insignificant. So first thing, a good domain knowledge. The second prerequisite is that your discovery needs to be aligned with what the company wants to do in the first place, because it could be the focusing on a worthy problem, coming up with a worthy solution, but that's for the wrong company. The company is going in a different direction. So you need to be aligned with where your company is going as well. And if you're in a multi-team company, there will be a cascade of a strategy cascade that you need to take into account. So, there will be a vision strategy at the top level that will then cascade into a vision and a strategy for the portfolio. From this will come a number of decided allocations for different strategic pillars or buckets of investments that the company will have decided. And then from there, you land into your own product vision and strategy. So your discovery needs to be aligned with all this to ensure that it is the right direction for your company. So let's talk about how do we land on the right problem. And the issue that we're facing often is that what users want is often different from what they need. So let's illustrate. Imagine going back 20 years, 2004, you're in a video rental store and you're doing your market research. So, going in the field, asking customers, what do you want from our store? What would be good for you? What is going to come out of that? Well, it's going to be incremental on the context in which they are. They're going to ask for reduced late fees, longer rentals, and perhaps a wider selection, which are not bad things. But as we know, 2004 was just before everything started going online and streaming. And in 2004, there was already a lot of signs that this was the direction in which the industry was eventually going to go. So when it comes to user research, we can't just focus on what customers are saying they want. We need to go a little bit deeper than that. And we're going to look at two models that allow us to do that. The first one is one of my favorite models. Why is that my favorite model? It's because it's a model that helped me out of a number of, I would say, tight spots or complex situations. And it really worked really well for me. So this one comes from Strategizer. It's the company that came up with it. And it describes a number of different steps that I'm going to go with you through with you now. So the first thing is that you need to be really super clear about the target segment. We can't insist enough on having a clear understanding and narrowing down the segment that you want to talk about, because unless you do that, it's going to be too diffuse. You're not going to have anything precise enough to make it actionable. So first of all, you need to be very clear on the segment. And then instead of asking customers what they want, well, you observe them. You look at what they're doing, the tasks that they're going through in the context of your domain. So you will be looking at all the things that they do. And as a result of the things that they do, they will obtain some gains and some pains. So things that they do, for instance, maybe they cycle to work. And the gains is that, well, they feel that they really like not having to use their car, but work is a little far and there's a bit of a steep hill to get there, and they arrive to their first meeting quite tired. So that's the pain. The gain will always be the reason why you're doing something. But once you've got that, then you can start ideating and thinking through what would be things that will enhance the gains and things that will reduce the pain. So let's take an example here. It's a marketplace for gas engineers. It's quite old, but I think it's still relevant. There's an app, and the app is able to help gas engineers. It does a great job. For instance, it allows to streamline appointments booking by allowing users to book directly those appointments in the engineer's diary. Imagine you're a gas engineer, you have 20 boiler services that you need to perform. Then what you do is you will get all those appointments sent over to the customers. They will book them directly in your diary. And not only that, but it will also book them and group them in a specific area so that you can limit travel. And then finally, it reduces paperwork. So that's your starting point. You have a product that does that. And the question is, okay, but what are we doing next? And this is where this method comes in. So the first thing is you would have to do, if you were in that industry, you would have to start listing all the customer jobs, the things that they do. And here you have the whole cycle of running a gas engineer business. You need to find some customers, you need to deliver on the work, you need to send an invoice, you need to stay on top of all the different regulatory changes that happen. Those are all the things that you have to do. So first step, understand what are your customers doing. And you can take a fairly wide approach to what they're doing, because you will find actually probably potential interesting problems a little bit by widening a little bit the scope of what your company or product currently does. So first step is understanding all the different jobs. And then after that, well, you need to find out the pains and the gains. And a great way of doing it is to spend time with gas engineers. So in this particular example, you would spend the day with a gas engineer, take their, fetch their tools, hold the flashlight, carry stuff around, spend the day in the van with them, and ask them about all those different steps and the things that go well, the things that don't go so well, the things they're concerned about. That will give you a lot of very useful insight on what are the relevant problems to focus on. So in this scenario, we actually did it. We had 31 of them, and you have the answers here, the sort of things that people were saying. And then we grouped that into that feedback into clusters of problems that we thought were interesting. And we ended up with 3 problems that we thought were worth investigating further. And that's how you can using the value proposition canvas, find out about how to get some problems that are worth looking at. Now, I went very quickly through this value proposition canvas. If you want to know more, this book is great. It's like a slide deck, really, and it will go into more details about the jobs and what are the different types of jobs. So this book is from the company who came up with a model called Strategizer, and it's a very good read. We have a review of that book in our toolbox. Now, there's another method, and if I had to pick between these 2 methods, I'd find it difficult. The next one is from a company called Strategin, invented by a guy called Tony Elwick. And it uses the concept of jobs to be done. Now, to be honest, jobs to be done is also kind of what the value proposition canvas is using, but it's doing it in a slightly different way. And jobs to be done is that kind of concept that can mean different things to different people. Here in this context of outcome-driven innovation, a typical job to be done would be, for instance, maintain a clean and hygienic home. the idea behind jobs to be done is that people don't buy a product for the sake of owning the product. You don't buy a vacuum cleaner just so that you can tell your neighbors, hey, I got a vacuum cleaner. Imagine that. That's not the point. The point is that there is a reason, and the reason is I need my home to be clean and hygienic. So understanding that job to be done, you can start then breaking down a number of outcomes that are associated with that particular job. Things that come with it, for instance, you want to minimize the time you're going to spend doing it. You need that if it's a cordless, if it's a battery powered vacuum cleaner, it needs to be always ready, not charging when I need it. It needs to work across different types of floors. It needs to have enough battery life that I can finish the whole place and don't have to do 2 different sessions. You can break it down. So for your own product, think about the top level job to be done and identify the different outcomes. You can find them for lots of different examples. If we're to talk about a smartwatch, for instance, there would be a job to be done maybe around fitness. And if the job to be done around, if there was a job to be done around, staying fit or getting coaching advice, then you could then start breaking those down into separate outcomes. What do you do with these outcomes? You rate them. So you ask your customers to rate them in 2 different areas. One is importance and the other one is satisfaction. So here in this particular case, minimize the time spent vacuuming. If I was the one answering that survey, I would say that is absolutely a very important thing. It's an 8. It always takes longer than I want, and therefore satisfaction, I would rate this as a 2. So you create a survey, or you create interviews, and then you go after as many people as possible to understand how do they think about these different outcomes. And if you calculate the opportunity score following the method provided or suggested by a strategizer, you can already see that the ones that have the highest scores are the ones that are potentially the most interesting. But there's something even more interesting you can do with that. You see, for each outcome, you have importance and satisfaction. So what you can do, you can put that into a chart. So horizontally, we have the importance. Vertically here, we have satisfaction. So what's going to happen? Well, you can break those down into 3 separate areas. First, you have the overserved outcomes. You overdid it in a way. Because compared to how important that particular thing is, the satisfaction is very high. And that is another way of saying don't invest any time on those, because you're not going to really move the dial. Customers are not willing to pay much more to get more of that. So it's kind of wasted money if you invest into those areas. Then the second is going to be the area that is appropriately served. It could be an area to improve, but really there isn't a problem per se in that particular area. Where it's becoming very interesting, it's the last cluster, the underserved outcomes. Those outcomes for which they're very important, but the satisfaction is not very high. Well, if you work on those problems, you're going to be able to actually effectively move the dial, because since they're important, you can assume to some extent that customers will be willing to pay more money to get a better result in those different areas. So that allows you to start narrowing down those problems that are worth going after. So 2 different methods, and obviously, of course, you can combine them. What I would say is that when it comes to finding the right problem, a lot of those different methods, they converge. You could like the opportunity tree or other methods. They kind of more or less tell the same story. So what's important is to pick one that works well for you and absolutely run with it. So that was about discovering the right problem. Now, what we still need to do after that is find the right solution. Now, here, imagine that we were running that vacuum cleaner business, and what can happen sometimes is that the engineers will go wild, and we'll tell them, okay, no, there's absolutely nothing that is off limit. We want the absolute best vacuum cleaner we could ever dream of. And sure enough, they're going to deliver on that. So I'm proud to announce to the world the Atom Sweep vacuum drone. You will never have to recharge it because it's nuclear powered. It's 1,000 times more powerful than its closest competitors. If you run it on floorboards, it will suck the nails out of the floorboards. And through its dust pulverizer, it will also pulverize the nails so that you will maximize the space in the bag. And by the way, the vacuum of the turbines are so powerful that the thing can fly and do the upstairs if you want. And that's what happens when there's no limit. People will invent the best thing that they can think of. And obviously, we need to. It could be a good idea, but it probably isn't. The key point is that we're not really sure. So how do we deal with this sort of thing? Well, I really like the idea of dual track agile suggested by Marty Kagan in his book Inspired. And the idea here is that you split your capacity in two, and you dedicate part of your capacity to a discovery track. Discovery track will have things that are not committed. Essentially, we're trying to validate that this is a good idea for us. And there are 4 tests that you will need to satisfy. The first test is it actually valuable? We validated the problem, but is that solution actually filling that gap? And there's a number of different methods. Again, I'm staying relatively high level. You can Google or ask ChatGPT to explain more details, what a Wizard of Oz, a concierge testing, or a fake door approach would be. But the idea is that you test the value of something without really building it. So if you were, for instance, to test the value of creating a new service for your company, say your company, let's say you have a supermarket, you're working at a supermarket, a large supermarket chain, and the idea is to extend into travel. Well, you could start creating a user journey on your website that talks about travel and travel offers and see whether people are following it. And you would need then to find a way of fulfilling some part of that service. But if people are not interested with travel, no matter how good the proposition is behind, they're never going to see it. They're never going to follow that user journey. So you need to understand whether actually does it click with customers or not. And that's how you test for value. I'm just describing one method here called the fake door, but there's a number of others that you could do. The next thing you need to do is test for feasibility. And this is where the engineering team will be looking at how hard is it to do something. It's always harder than expected. So you give them a chance of playing with the technology, creating a prototype, or perhaps a proof of concept for those aspects of the solution that are hardest. So if you find yourself in a situation where engineering always takes 3 or 4 times longer than they expected, well, maybe a discovery track is the answer to that particular problem. Next thing you need to do, once you've got the value and the feasibility, well, it's about trying to see whether that's actually viable for the business. So you understand how much customers are willing to pay for by running tests like the Van Westendorp price sensitivity meter. Again, something that we talk about in our toolbox, and you can find out more information if you Google it. But it's a way of trying to understand how much people are willing to pay for something. So you understand they value it. Now you understand how much they're willing to pay for it. You understand through feasibility how much it would cost. Then you're able to put together a business case or a financial model that looks at, is it likely to hit the mark or not? And then the fourth one is probably the easiest one to do, is to test for usability. Assuming it has value, assuming people are willing to pay for it, assuming that it can be built. Can users actually use it? properly. When you think of all the functions that your microwave oven might have, how many are we actually, or how many are you actually using? This is what I'm talking about here. So it's about making the device very usable, and there's a number of different methods that can be used, again, through some prototyping. We don't want to build the thing before we know that it's going to work, but we want to test that people are actually able to use it. So one last thing to bear in mind is that discovery doesn't stop at launch. During design, you need to make sure that all the hypotheses, all the question marks that you had in the back of your head have there will be some numbers coming out of the product once it's live to answer those questions. So for instance, it could be on user engagement, customer satisfaction, business and financial, or technical. You need to think of that while you're designing your product to make sure that you're going to actually get the answers. It might feel like it's automatically going to happen, but if we think about revenue and profit, for instance, it's not necessarily going to happen naturally if your product taxonomy, as in the way you layer the different layers of your product, if that is not matched in sales and in finance, it may actually be hard to know whether some add-ons that you've designed is actually working or not. So getting the telemetry, getting all those all that information into a dashboard that is ready before you launch is the last thing you need to do before the product actually is released. So as a summary, what did we talk about? Well, we talked about the importance, first of all, of being aligned with the company strategy. So the domain that you're going to research needs to be brought in line with what the company wants to do. And then it's about discovering what is the right problem and what will be the right solution. To find out what the right problem is, we talked about outcome-driven innovation as a way of asking customers about outcomes. And we talked about the value proposition canvas as a way of breaking down the different things that people do and understanding what are the pains and the gains associated with that. A little bit annoyingly, on the value proposition canvas, the right-hand side of the value proposition canvas matches the left-hand side of that diagram and vice versa. But you get the idea. The value proposition canvas, by prompting you to ideate around things that will elevate the gain and reduce the pain, is essentially moving you into trying to find the right solution. So again, you diverge and try to open as wide as possible the range of solutions before you narrow it down, and through dual track agile, start testing the things that are most likely to work. And obviously, you should not forget about the instrumentation to make sure that once your product is live, you know exactly how it performs. So that's the end of the part of that webinar. A quick reminder: if you enjoy this webinar, there's plenty more resources on our website about a range of different topics, and we'd love to be able to help you with training, either through a private training inside in your company or as a public training, and we also do face-to-face or online. So let's now get your questions. So Kenny making a comment here that discovery cycle compares with a typical Lean Six Sigma cycle. Absolutely. There's really nothing completely new. These models, they kind of hit more or less the same sort of things. The important is to follow one methodology, and you pick the one that works for you, and you stay aware of other potential methods that would be more suitable for particular situations. Personally, I find that the value proposition canvas is great when there isn't really much already in place. It's greenfield, whereas outcome-driven innovation is when there is an existing product and we're trying to extend it. John Crisp, is satisfaction of your product or of non-client's existing solution? So there's different ways I think I can interpret that question. When it comes to customer satisfaction and jobs to be done in general, what we need to remember is that there isn't really many completely new needs. We're humans, meaning, we need to feed ourselves, we need to move from one place to another. When you reduce it down to that, people will always have existing solutions. And to illustrate, even in business today, a lot of the competition, a lot of the existing solution that people are using turns out to be Word, Excel, and other solutions like that. So when we're trying to understand satisfaction, it could be with whatever they're using right now. It's not your product, but is that satisfactory, or is there a problem? And if they mention that they're using Excel, but it's a pain, then there is probably something that you could do here. And if they mention it's Excel, and frankly, it's something I'm doing for 5 minutes every month, I don't want to spend more time, and it doesn't want me to spend more time, doesn't need me to spend more time on this, then satisfaction is high, importance is low. That's probably not an area you should be focusing on. Let's look at another question. What are the key differences, if any, of what to keep in mind while doing product discovery for B2B and B2C? Varun, I love that question. It's a very important question. Yes, there are differences. And generally the key difference is that in B2B, the user and the buyer, they tend to be the same person. So it is a simpler exercise to run. In B2B, however, there will often be a number of different people who will have a say on the decision. There will be procurement, for instance, legal, IT. They may all have a say. And therefore, when you analyze the needs, you can't just stick to the user. You have to think a little bit broader and ask yourself, what do I need to deliver so that I get a yes from legal, I get a yes from procurement, I get a yes from IT. If we think about legal and IT, it's often going to be around GDPR, for instance. If you're using customer data, they will want to know how that information is secured. How do you do a subject access request? The sort of thing that the end user probably doesn't care much about, but those other users will want to have a satisfactory answer to. So it's about widening the range of stakeholders that you will consider legitimate to interview when you're doing that part of the discovery. Any suggestions for observation with institutional clients, Steve is asking. It can be difficult sometimes to get the feedback, to hear it from the horse's mouth, as the English expression goes, because you often have intermediaries. For instance, in sales, you will often have a salesperson who wants to be the only one talking to the customer. And same with institutional clients. There could be a number of different barriers. This is often more or something that needs to be solved at with the senior leadership. They need to understand the importance for people doing the discovery, be it people who are in the in sales, in product design or product management, to be able to talk to customers directly, and that helps. I think Steve, you were Eddie, you were adding some comments on this as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you might be able to have either kind of proxy users who've got similar sort of profiles to the customers that you have, or I guess there might be indirect ways of trying to get observation, either through surveys or questionnaires, which you don't have to be there then right in front of people. Or even if you can't get in front of people, you might be able to arrange video calls or other things. And then I guess you might get some data through analytics and other measurements. So I guess there's a difference between being right close to the person and being a little bit further abstract. But I guess there's no silver bullet answer there. There's probably a range of different things that you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a series of questions around the discovery steps in different contexts: prop tech, climate tech, healthcare, or smart home assistant. This is always about going to the needs that customers have and what they're doing, and what you want to observe is how do they invest around the amount of effort that they're investing to solve a particular problem. So I wouldn't say there is a typical method that works more in prop tech than it would in climate tech, for instance. It's about talking to users, but asking the right question. And on that note, I would probably suggest also looking up the MOM test by a guy called Rob Fitzpatrick, because when it comes to discovery, he has a very interesting way of suggesting you ask your questions. And just to say a few words on this, if you ask a customer, here's my new vacuum cleaner, do you want it? What you're really asking is, would you want me to spend 6 months of my life working on a product, which when it comes out, you can decide to buy or not? You're essentially offering people an option. If you're showing them a product and say, do you think that's a great idea? If only out of politeness, a lot of people will say, yeah, I'm sure it's a great idea. So the MOM test is about asking questions in a way that actually doesn't talk about the product, but you're focusing on what people have done when they encountered a particular problem, and the amount of effort they wanted to invest. For instance, if you were to come up with an app that solves the problem of finding out what to do for dinner, you would ask people. You would not tell them, "Hey, I've got an app that tells you what you should do for dinner based on what you have in your fridge and your pantry." But instead, you would ask, "When was the last time you didn't know what to do for dinner?" And then you would ask them, "What did you do last time you didn't know what to do for dinner?" And people will give you different answers. Some people will say, "Well, I spent 40 minutes trying to create a meal based on some recipes I found online." And others will tell you, "Well, I just ordered a takeaway. That cost me 5 minutes of my time. And, I don't mind paying for that." So that the latter category, they're not interested in your product, because even though they experience the need to know, or they have the pain point of not knowing what to do for dinner, their willingness to invest effort in it is very low. All right. Do we have time for more questions, Eddie?
I think you've got 1 more minute, Cyril, so this would be the last question.
All right. Let me try to pick one. How long does the initial discovery typically take? Oh man, that's a very hard one, actually. The Brits have this expression, how long is a piece of string? Meaning you can make it as long as you want. I would say that there's a fine line or a range to find that you don't need answers to every single question as part of your product development process. You just need to know enough that if you start building it, you're not going to go massively wrong. I've spent the cycle I was describing earlier. It probably took me about 2 weeks to execute, from listing all the jobs to be done to running the interviews and coming out with the workshops. That's all it took. But it was a very intense 2 weeks. I didn't get much else done during that time.
Fantastic. Okay. Cyril, thank you. Bang on time. Top points for the timing there, and fantastic presentation. Really great job. And to the audience, thanks for taking the time to attend. I hope you learned some good tips on discovery, and wishing you the success in the future. If we can help you in any way, please look at Product Focus, and we'd be delighted to help you. But have a fantastic day, and hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.